Hi, this is me. I'm in the Quantock Hills on a bike trip from my home in the Cotswolds down to Cornwall. I always planned to go bike touring, something slow where I could see the landscape around me and notice those little changes that happen every few miles. I've often been to Cornwall, but always by car, too busy with the motorway rush, having no idea what the places in between look like. No time for detours, and always surrounded by cars and trucks, only stopping at service stations, so I get to where I'm going quicker. My cycle route was far from direct. It would take me through some beautiful landscapes, far from the corridor of endless warehouses, power lines and urban sprawl that line our motorways. I wanted to follow as many quiet lanes, old railways, canal towpaths and bike trails as I could find. I hardly touched a busy road on the whole trip, whilst discovering hidden gems of the countryside everywhere. With honey-coloured stone villages and quiet lanes, stone walls and hedgerows lined with cow parsley, it's easy to see why the Cotswolds is designated as an area of outstanding natural beauty. So in early May, with the sun shining and great weather predicted, I set off to cover the 500 kilometres and the many hills between home and Padstow. Not the longest tour, but enough to test my ageing legs. Away from the busy Foss Way, this is a cyclist paradise. There's little traffic on the quiet roads. You're as likely to meet a horse, runner or a fellow cyclist as a car. The spider web of lanes that fan out in all directions provide endless choices, as long as you don't mind the hills and the potholes. The first day was spent getting out of my normal cycle patch, getting away from those familiar lanes and heading towards Bath. I headed south down through Fairford and Malmesbury and managed to find the only rain in the whole of the UK that day, before arriving just south of Bath by the Kennet and Avon Canal. Day 2 dawned warm and sunny. Today I'd be riding next to the Kennet and Avon Canal before following the rail trail to Radstock, then over the Mendip Hills to the cathedral city of Wells. In the afternoon I'd head over the Somerset levels before stopping at Bridgewater. You can follow the towpath on the Kennet and Avon Canal all the way to London, but I'm just covering a short stretch before joining the Two Tunnels Trail. The Two Tunnels Trail connects Bath and Midsummer Norton on the route of the old Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway. The line, like so many others, closed in the 1960s. But following conversion, this gained a new life as a very popular off-road rail trail. Tunnels and viaducts give the route drama, and there are great views off the beautiful surrounding countryside. The 20 kilometres passes far too quickly, and now I have to deal with the Mendip Hills before arriving in the small but perfectly formed city of Wells. The word quaint doesn't quite cover it. Wells is one of my favourite places. On a sunny day like today, it's a place to linger with its cathedral, bishop's palace, gardens, historic buildings and ancient high street. Boosted by a late lunch consisting mainly of cheeses and pork pie in the marketplace, it's time to get moving again. I spent the afternoon rolling over the very flat Somerset levels. The clue really is in the name. I was warned that the levels are boring, but I found them peaceful. With lots of wetlands and reserves, this low-lying land laced with ditches and drainage channels is populated by many birds. Rather than battling the rush hour traffic on the A39, I decided to extend my day, taking the scenic detour into Bridgewater, following the Bridgewater and Taunton Canal towpath. Now it's time to rest. Tomorrow will be a big day of climbing. Leaving the centre of Bridgewater, the climbing started almost straight away. But hills are worth it, the views usually reward the effort. And this had plenty of effort on the rolling hills, up 100 metres, down 50, and up another 100 metres and down another 50. I followed single track trails and broader forest paths along the old Drovers Road before emerging onto the moorlands around Black Hill. Hardly a soul in sight, just me and the horses. When I planned this trip, this day gave me anxiety. I'm used to climbing hills in the Cotswolds, but the combination of the Quantock Hills, Exmoor and 100 kilometres of distance on a loaded bike would be a test. On this occasion, the Drovers Road on top of the Quantock Hills was a bit of bike touring nirvana. An unexpected treat discovered along the way that I had no idea existed in this quiet corner of England. The reward, though, is a change in the landscape and the terrain. I find it exhilarating as you climb up through the trees and out onto the open moorland. Once out on the open moorlands with views left and right and the sea ahead, I delayed and dawdled. The rocky trail required attention, but so did the views. Progress was slow. Finally I made the descent to the coast into Watchet, where there were steam trains to be seen. After Watchet, I followed the coast road to Dunster with its castle and grounds. Unfortunately, with no place to secure my bike and bags, I couldn't explore. The one curse of solo bike touring is it's often hard to explore a place properly, as you can't leave the bike and bags unattended. The late afternoon was one long climb up into the Exmoor National Park, and nowhere near as demanding as I feared. The climb was long, but my wahoo rarely went into the red that signifies greater than 8% incline. So I settled into my low gears, head down, found my rhythm, and got through it before finishing the day at Exford. The test I was so anxious about had turned into a perfect day on the bike. In the morning, I awoke with no reaction to the previous day's exertions. Today, I'd be climbing to the highest point of the trip at 500 metres high on Exmoor. Exmoor and I have history. The previous 2 times I've had to abort, once for a weather warning and once because my pedals sheared off my bike. This time in perfect conditions with a fully functional bike, I follow the lane up the valley with the River Barle below. I'd like to say I did it in one go, but the views were too good not to pause. Eventually I made it to the top of my route on Fyldon Common, with its 360-degree views. I stayed on Fyldon Common, absorbing the views all the way across to Dartmoor, where I'd be staying tonight. But first a long downhill to Barnstaple and the start of the Tarka Trail. The drop down to Barnstaple along National Cycle Route 1 was exhilarating and over far too quickly. In the bright sunshine, Barnstaple town centre looks to be surviving better than most. Far enough from the regional centres of Plymouth and Exeter to keep its shops, and with enough tourists around to keep it busy. Refueled by lunch in Barnstaple, it was time to ride the Tarka Trail. Another old railway line closed in the 1960s, but now converted to a leisure trail. It's a magnet for families and walkers. The Tarka Trail follows the coast to Bideford before turning inland. After Bideford there's little sign of habitation, and it's easy to see why this line closed once the motor car and trucks took over. The old line follows the River Torridge inland to Meath. It's a scenic ride, with the trail crossing the river multiple times. 40 kilometres of blissful, flat gravel trail. After the trail, the late afternoon is spent in the back lanes of the North Devon Hills, on my way to Oakhampton and the granite trail that skirts the edge of Dartmoor. The Granite Trail is another converted railway line that runs all the way down to Plymouth, with big bridges and viaducts and even bigger views in the evening sunlight. The final day of my ride started blue and sunny just like the others. Today I'd leave Devon and cycle across North Cornwall to Padstow, finishing the ride on the Camel Trail. I crossed into Cornwall at Launceston. This ancient town, built on a hill, still has part of its town wall and the Norman castle dating to 1070. Launceston, with its busy high street, seemed to be thriving as I passed through on market day. After Launceston, the National Cycle Route travels through Kenzie Valley. This incredibly green and beautiful lane feels very narrow, the steep valley sides and the high hedgerows creating what felt like a lost world, I didn't see another person or vehicle. At Wentford Bridge, I picked up the Camel Trail. This cycle path, built on an old railway line, follows the Camel River. With my legs getting tired, I let gravity take effect as the trail rolls gently downhill for 35 kilometres to the fishing village of Padstow. At Boscombe Junction, you can still see steam trains on the Heritage Line, bringing back the feel of what this line used to be like. Eventually, the trail comes out on the broad Camel Estuary with its blue-green waters and sandbanks and tidal creeks. The Atlantic Express used to run direct to London, bringing holidaymakers to Padstow. The trains may have gone, but this route along the banks of the River Camel is some legacy to enjoy. At Ironbridge, with the first views of the ocean, the end of the ride is just a mile or so away. I pause, take some footage and generally put off finishing this tour. But now it's time to push on and complete the last mile. Rolling into Padstow, I reflect that instead of 5 hours in the car, it's taken me 5 days. No ugly motorways or urban sprawl, just the endless beauty of nature and rural England and the places in between. Take the detours, you won't regret it. If you made it to this point, thanks for watching. Consider a thumbs up or subscribing. See you in the next one.